You're listening to the RTI Press Pass powered by Rocky Top Insider.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler. Joined with me, as always, Ryan Schumpert and Ryan Sylvia. Yesterday, going into the week, Tennessee officially announced or indicated that they had signed 20 transfer portal players. We're going to be breaking that down today, talking about how many starters we see from this class, talking about who might be able to step up in this class, talking about underrated players in this class, and much more. It is a big show ahead, so we welcome you in. Again, Ryan Schumpert and Ryan Sylvia here with me to break it all down. Good morning to you both. How are we doing today? And Sylvia, I'll start with you on that one.
I'm doing good. It's a cold week in Knoxville, so we're trying to stay warm here, but it's been a good weekend of watching Tennessee kind of round out this transfer class and seeing maybe some quick videos of workouts beginning as the early enrollees and all of them are on campus. Then basketball season also in the swing of SEC play. So it's been a fun time.
Yeah. Schump, what about you?
Yeah, it's been good trying to navigate the inclement weather. Not really as bad for us, but went down to Tuscaloosa over the weekend, going to Athens tomorrow. So been a lot of weather app monitoring and a lot of Northeast Tennessee weather Twitter accounts, or the various Twitter accounts that are trying to project the weather. So monitoring a lot of that, but obviously here in at least the Knoxville area, I was going to say Greater East Tennessee. It might be worse the further northeast you go, but we haven't gotten it too bad. Especially compared to Nashville, which is true, but really compared to a lot of the southeast, I think Knoxville got it about it. We've got it about as easy as anybody has.
Yeah, it feels like we were right on that line where everything just kind of trickled just north of us and ended up getting a lot of rain on Sunday. That wasn't a big deal because the weather got up to, 43, 44 degrees at some point. A little bit of a surprise, at least for me, who might have given up on checking the weather at that point, waking up Monday morning and seeing a fresh layer of snow on the ground and all over the streets. But by like noon, I was ready to get out of the house already. The streets seemed fine. I was definitely feeling cooped up over the last couple of days, but it seems like at this point, just kind of wait for the last of it to melt, and we're good to go on our way. So safe travels to you up to Georgia, and glad to have you make it there and back from Alabama. What a crazy game there in Coleman Coliseum. Obviously, you were there covering with boots on the ground, the re-debut, if you will, of Charles Bediako. That had the Twitter world fired up, and everybody was talking about it throughout the week. And now it seems like we're going to have to wait a little bit even longer to figure out what that next ruling is going to be on him. But, man, just a raucous reception that he got, obviously, as you would expect from that home crowd. But a lot of credit to Tennessee for, a mature performance right there, not letting any of the outside noise come into play. And Tennessee got its biggest basketball win, one of its biggest basketball wins of the season, certainly one of its biggest in SEC play, where they picked up their first true road win in Tuscaloosa, and that makes it 5 straight for the Vols over the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, for sure. A game Tennessee kind of had, at least these next 2 games, or the Alabama game and Georgia game, they had a little more pressure on them after dropping one at home against Kentucky. As the term we've been using, they didn't hold serve at home, and it's a pretty difficult January schedule, so a big one to go into the Tuscaloosa. I think you got, in a lot of ways, what you thought it might look like before the season. I mean, Rick Barnes said this is the starting lineup we thought we would use. JP Estrella in there at the 4 spot besides Felix Okpara. And he had some good and bad in his performance, but, I think especially with Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament playing combined as well as they have, besides, probably the Rutgers game, but, they won the game by 30. So, both those guys playing really well, and Tennessee, kind of defensively, what you've seen them do in the past against Alabama, it kind of in that way felt similar to the game 2 years ago in Tuscaloosa, where just the last 6-7 minutes, Alabama really struggled to score, and Tennessee, like you said, Houston game probably still their best win of the season, but I think pretty clearly their second best. I don't think it's any others that are in that realm. Is those two, and now we'll see if they can get on the right side of things. They got a chance to pick up 2 games this week, 2 hard games. Georgia, obviously, on the road is going to be a difficult game. And then Auburn, team that's sneakily playing a lot better. They won in Gainesville on Saturday, probably as good as a win as anybody's had in the league this year. So a challenging week, but if Tennessee can pick up 2 this week, you kind of start looking forward to what the schedule looks like after that, and you could see them getting on a little bit of a roll here in the first half of February.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about basketball later. No episode of the RTI Rim Runner before the Georgia game, so we're going to talk about that here at the end of the show for any of the loyal RTI listeners who listen to all the different shows, and we appreciate that certainly. But again, we'll try to give you your basketball fix coming out of the Alabama game, going into the Georgia game here at the end of the press pass today. And then, of course, we got some Lady Vols to talk about as well. Sylvia, Kim Caldwell's squad, I believe, might be at the top of the SEC standings, maybe on a 6-game win streak, something like that.
Yeah, 6-0 in SEC. Play the last undefeated SEC team alive now. They have not had the toughest SEC schedule up front. They beat Kentucky and Alabama, who are both top 25 teams. So you got to give them credit for that. But it's not like they've played any of the juggernauts of the SEC yet. So still have to win the games in front of you. That's, both men's and women's basketball. You talk about good conferences like what the SEC's been recently. And it's, you win your home games, you win your games you should, and you try to steal a couple on the road. Tennessee's done that so far. They've won the games they should, and they stole one on the road, Alabama, and they stole one at home, I guess you could say, against Kentucky, even though Kentucky doesn't look the best at the moment anymore. So still can't turn down a 6-0 start. Top of the SEC standings. We'll see how long it lasts. Maybe it'll last the whole season. Maybe it'll last one more game. Who knows? But it'll start to heat up pretty soon with some more real juggernauts of the South Carolinas, the Texases. You got the out-of-conference games. UConn coming up. A lot more tougher matchups coming up on the horizon.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And again, we'll talk a little bit more Lady Vols towards the end of the show as well. But before we move into football, Ryan, I often, I should say, point people in your direction on social media to kind of catch up with some of the latest news, notes, and coverage of Tennessee athletics, whether it's football, basketball, or baseball. You do a great job. And boy, baseball at this point, only about 17 days away, just over 2 weeks away. But people might have a hard time going to your Twitter account right now to be figuring that out. Just what has the last week or so been like for you as you have navigated having a hacked account? I think people. This has been very upsetting to people. Obviously upsetting to you.
I don't know about that.
Look,
I don't think most people really care.
It's ruined my week personally.
That's right.
I do have one friend who is
ruined
like
Sylvia's week, but
I do have one friend that is so upset about it, like
in shambles,
enraged. Like, he is significantly more upset than I am. Yeah, I mean it's annoying. But like how I navigate, I mean, it's pretty, simple. I'm sending in the request and I'm just tweeting the stories from the RTI account. There's really not a whole lot else. So hopefully I get it back. It's not the end of the world. A lot worse stuff going on if this is my biggest issue. So
you've used Grant Ramey as a ghostwriter a couple times.
I did use Grant Ramey as a ghostwriter. Sitting at basketball practice last Friday about a Charles Bediako situation. I've fired up because I don't want to destroy the RTI algorithm too much. I'm not trying to do that, but I have fired up about once a day, once a night, the Paul Kaharski timeline, see if there's any Titans news that I might have missed. We poached your defensive line coach yesterday.
Wow.
He's leaving the Cowboys to come to the Titans, work for Robert Saleh in New York previously.
White Cotton?
That seems possible. It's a white guy with bald hair, so maybe I don't know.
I think that's it. I think it's Aaron White Cotton. He was a big one, and I think Dallas wanted to keep. So that's right. He moves on to the Titans. That's tough.
There you go. So
it's tough for a guy like me.
Get bodied. But yeah, no, it's hopefully I'll get it back. I've had a little bit of communication. They suspended the account, which I thought that's good in my eyes. In my eyes, that means less people are going. If I ever get the account back, it means less people are going to have the opportunity to unfollow me beforehand as they get spammed with Elon Musk propaganda. So we'll see what happens. I haven't heard anything since Friday, so I wouldn't say I'm the most optimistic, but we'll see. We'll see how the chips fall.
That's a tough situation, especially for a guy like you who is, very constantly giving out news and notes to people about the different sports, and you got another one that's about to start. You got one in conference play. You got one in one of its most critical off-season times right now, and then one obviously that's starting up in less than 3 weeks. That's a tough situation to navigate. But I do think, again, it ruined Sylvia's week. I think that does count for something there.
And I was going to fight back. I was going to DM Schump00 on Twitter and say, hey, can you please give it? And I got scared. I thought maybe I'd be the next target if I reached out. So I sat on That's on me. I wasn't brave. I wasn't courageous.
I don't blame you.
That happened. I was a spectator.
You know what?
It would have been a fun bit to just start DMing, because we have the email that it originally got changed to. Like, they came in hostile takeover in the middle of the night, changed the email to the account, changed the password. So the email could have been changed again, but we had the original email. So we could have, it would have been a fun bit to email them and just be mean to them, essentially.
I was pretty disappointed. What?
Send the email out to the public. Let the public do it. Get some foot soldiers.
That's true. That's true. Boots on the ground for your help.
Boots on the ground.
I was pretty disappointed that the day that it happened, you had Bob recorded the rim runner, and it really hadn't even hit me yet that the hostile takeover had happened. So I still tagged you in that post. It's like, this guy can't even throw us a bone.
Great.
Just give the rim runner a quick retweet.
Yeah, give the rerunner.
He's stolen. He's already come in. He's stolen the keys to the house. He's made up a sandwich. He's redesigned the living room. All this kind of stuff. He couldn't even throw us a bone and check the mail for us while he was at it. So
Sylvia,
that's when I turned and I said, I'm against this.
Sylvia, I don't think you heard this, but I was making this joke at basketball. I said, I'll tell you what, this guy got more than he bargained with. I bet he's been real annoyed by those Pete Nako's tweet notifications. I bet those Matt Zennett's Chris Hummer tweet notifications. He was not ready for those every 20 minutes. I bet that annoyed the crap out of him.
Well, I told this to Bob. Bob Baskerville called me the day it happened, and he was like, "What's going on with Ryan's Twitter?" And I said, "Well, I think it's your fault. Both of your co-hosts have now had these exact same things happen."
They're coming for Bob next.
That's so true. Yeah,
it's the Grim Reaper and a different knocking on all the doors, and Bob's next.
Bob might be next. It prompted me to go turn on the 2-factor thing. I changed my password. I was just like, I'm not messing with any of this. And maybe it's a good reminder to go ahead and, change your passwords every once in a while. I think we all get, fairly entrenched in the ones that we use and they never get changed or anything. Not that was the culprit of why it happened to you, but it's like, boy, maybe this is a good wake-up call to go ahead and change some of those things around. But if you're looking for Ryan's coverage during the basketball game, obviously a lot of people like Sylvia here are going to be in shambles when the Georgia game rolls around on Wednesday night. So you can head over to Rocky Top Insider Twitter account at Rocky Top Insider. And there's a good chance that that's where Ryan will be tweeting from to get out some of his thoughts on the game and everything live from Athens, Georgia and Stegman Coliseum. Makes me think that Tennessee is playing in back-to-back Coliseums, which I don't know how often that happens, but it will be happening during this stretch. All right, let's move into football. Again, looking at Monday night, Tennessee went ahead and essentially announced that 20 of their transfer players had signed with the program. Now, we have 21 commitments on our list. The only one that we're missing so far is tight end Drake Martinez from UT Martin. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out in the future. But the rest of them are the familiar names that you've known so far, from the star edge rusher from Penn State, Chaz Coleman, from the new kicker that Tennessee got with Cooper. Is it Ranvier? Something along those lines. We'll certainly figure out during spring ball that exact pronunciation from Louisville and all the different players and prospects in between. So we'll start again figuring out a little bit more about each one of those guys as spring ball rolls around here over the next couple months. But until then, Tennessee did go ahead and announce those 20 players. Don't really need to go through and read them all, but we will go ahead and talk about them. So as I bring up a list of this, actually, let's go through just super, super quick, and we will go ahead and do that. There it is. Okay. You got safety Koa Moss from Kansas State. You've got offensive lineman Ori Williams from LSU, cornerback Kayan Lee from Auburn, defensive lineman Xavier Gilliam from Penn State, long snapper and linebacker Blake Howard from Eastern Kentucky. You've got linebacker Amari Campbell from Penn State, edge rusher Chaz Coleman from Penn State, safety DeJuan Lane from Penn State, edge rusher Jordan Norman from Tulane, safety TJ Metcalf from Michigan, his brother Tevis Metcalf, also from Michigan, a defensive back. You've got offensive guard / offensive tackle, a little bit of a versatile offensive lineman there, Donovan Haslam from West Virginia, running back Javon Gordon from Tulane, tight end Trent Thomas from South Alabama, safety DJ Burks from App State, cornerback Isaiah Hodge from Colorado, quarterback Ryan Staub from Colorado, a wide receiver and a return specialist Ian Duarte from Idaho State. You've got a defensive back Jadis Richard from Miami. And then, of course, we've already talked about Drake Martinez, the tight end commit from UT Martin that has not officially signed with Tennessee. It doesn't appear, so we'll keep an eye on that one. But that pretty much is your Tennessee transfer portal signing class. Just let's start things off by saying that what do you think about this? What do you think about this class overall that Tennessee's brought in? At least to me, from the top of my head, a significantly bigger transfer portal class than I can remember Tennessee targeting or attacking in the last couple of years? And are there any still holes that you feel like Tennessee did not necessarily address? Quarterback going to be a big talking point. It's already been a big talking point over the last month. But what do you guys think of just kind of this overall class so far and how Tennessee managed to go ahead and address some of their needs?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that I like about it. I would start with the defensive backfield. I like the work that they did there. And I thought Jadis Richard, at this point, the other two, Duarte and Martinez, the other two commits Tennessee got this weekend, kind of felt like you're just adding warm bodies more than anything. But I like the Richard pickup just from a depth standpoint, and a guy that in his college career has played legitimate snaps at safety, at nickel, at corner. And I would think corner where he'd be more likely to factor. We talked about it. I like Kayan Lee as a replacement for Ricky Gibson, and with that, I feel pretty good about Tennessee's projected starters. But
yeah,
you just look past them, and you're like, it just feels like they need a body there. I'd feel better if Trey Petit was your 4 entering the season and not your 3. So I think Richard, not that he will for sure end up being ahead of him, but at least gives you a guy that's played some meaningful college football and to compete with. And just as a whole, I like what they did in the defensive backfield. And then, I think they added depth mostly where they needed to. As far as shortcomings, quarterback's an interesting one. It feels like, they ended up adding body, which we knew they needed to. It feels a little bit like there was a line drawn to me where if you couldn't get one of these top guys, you felt like you were better just rolling in with George McIntyre and Faison Brandon. So I don't necessarily love it. I don't necessarily love what the plan and the execution looked like, but to me, that's one that it's just time will tell. We'll see. I mean, it's a gamble, or you're putting your trust in the young quarterbacks you have in that room. And, it's certainly possible those guys go out and play, well next season. And you look back and say, all right, Tennessee didn't make any wrong decisions or made, it was fine how they handled things. So, and it could obviously go the opposite way where we're all sitting here in October like, man, Tennessee really messed up at quarterback. And then the other one, defensive line, to me, I just don't think I think that's about as weak as a position on the roster. When I just look at it as a whole, don't see a ton of depth, don't see a ton of star power. So I surprised, confused they didn't try to go out and add a couple more bodies, especially kind of at the edge spots.
Oh, yeah, that's where I'm held up too, is the defensive line, where, I don't think you'll really see defensive lines across the country ever be as deep as Tennessee was in 2024, where you're rotating like 3 deep very comfortably at every position across the line. But last year was way too thin, and it showed up where you got a little banged up on the interior, and all of a sudden now you're sliding Dominic Bailey, and he's playing a lot of defensive tackle while other guys are recovering from injury, and then now you're thinner at defensive end than you probably want to be, and you saw it become an issue throughout the season. So that felt like a spot where it's like, okay, go in and really retool that defensive line. And they got some big names, like they got Chaz Coleman's a great pickup. I'm still not, and he's a guy too, where maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this later, where he's probably the biggest name they got, but he's still very unproven. So, and he's very young, and he could be really good as a junior, but still taking steps to become really good this upcoming year. So I'm interested to see how his season plays out. But I really like that pickup. I like the pickup of Jordan Norman, of Xavier Gilliam from Penn State. But the fact that that was it is a little concerning, not just on the interior of the defensive line. Now, I guess your Leo position feels good, but I'm still curious what the defensive end spot looks like, because you're rolling into next season with really just Tyree Weathersby and Marion Dye, maybe a handful of freshmen. So defensive line's the one to me that I felt like they would have picked up more talent there, would have picked up more proven guys, and they just ended up not doing that. But we'll see how much they use just 3 linemen, because if you can get away with going with some 3-3 looks every once in a while and going with three defensive linemen and 3 linebackers, and you find a way to make that work, your linebacker room is unbelievably deep with the addition of Amari Campbell and bringing back Arion Carter. So that could, I guess, cover up some things, but how much can you consistently rely on going to a 3-3 look rather than a 4-3 or 4-2, which it is a base 4-2-5 defense for Jim Knowles.
Yeah, absolutely. The 3-3-5 stuff I worry about. I mean, I think you can do it some. I don't know if you can
consistently rely on that.
Yeah, I think you need someone like if you're going to do that, I think you need someone like Jaden Perlotti to take a huge growth. Guys that can play in pass coverage a little bit more, or just be a little bit more well-rounded. Because you look at Amari Campbell, I think he's kind of the same way. You look at Arion Carter, someone like Jeremiah Thielander, I think just a little bit limited. They're more downhill, play a little bit sideline to sideline, but not great rushing the passer, not great in pass coverage. To me, I look at that room, I see Edwin Spillman as the only guy that I'm like he can do a bunch of different things well. So Parlati's one guy that, you just look at his skill set and his speed, you feel like he could probably be better playing in space than some of those guys. So we'll see. D tackle, I feel okay about. Like I think they kind of lack the star power, but I at least see the vision. There's 5 guys there that I feel pretty solid about playing. I would have liked there to be a 6, so you feel a little bit more capable of withstanding injuries if they come like they did a season ago. But as you said, that's hard. That's hard to do in this portal era to find pretty competent, capable players to sign up to be the 6th or to be the 3rd string defensive tackle. So it's reliant on guys taking steps. But that's just kind of the cost of doing business in some ways. If you're going to roll with those guys back, those guys are going to want to have major roles, and you're banking that Lee and Isaiah Campbell can be good players, solid players, capable players for you next year, and then you can retain them again, and then hope, in their junior years they can kind of become stars or high-level SEC players.
One of the things that we talked about going into this transfer portal window or cycle or however you want to kind of phrase it, was we felt like there was certainly a possibility where Tennessee could just go out there and get a big haul of defensive backs, whether they've played cornerback, whether they played safety, whether they played the nickel position, whatever it is, and just bring them all in and let them get out there on the field during spring camp, over the summer, during fall camp, and just kind of figuring out where guys slide into place. Not necessarily, some of the absolute best portal prospects of that position, but just go out there and bolster the room with a lot of different guys and see how everything shakes out. It really feels like that's kind of the path that Tennessee went down. I really like what Tennessee did with the secondary. I think there are some impact players there who you can look at and go, hey, I really see a spot for that guy at this position. We'll talk about that more a little bit later on. But I simply like that Tennessee, and some of these guys you might not see very often. I think that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But I do like that Tennessee just went out there. They got a bunch of guys, and I think they'll kind of throw them out there on the field, especially during spring camp, to start off this offseason training regimen and just say, hey, we'll see what we have. We'll see which guys fit in different spots. I like what Tennessee was able to do there. And then, Schump, back to what you were talking about a second ago. With the defensive line, it feels a little bit like the opposite, where you are relying on a lot of those guys that you've recruited over the last couple of years to be able to step into some of those positions. Yes, you brought in Coleman and Gilliam from Penn State and Norman as well from Tulane to play that defensive line spot. But it also feels like a lot of the guys that you're going to be seeing or watching make plays or attempting to make plays on Saturdays is going to be guys who you've heard from the recruiting world, is going to be guys that you've heard with a backup position for Tennessee in years past. So obviously it feels like two kind of different approaches there, but I do personally like what Tennessee did with the secondary a lot, and just bringing a ton of bodies in, saying, hey, who fits where? Let's go out there on the field and compete and see who lands, who falls in what spot.
Yeah, I like the fact that you added, to me, a lot of guys that are starting caliber players, but then you did add the depth. You did add the TJ Metcalf, the Jadias Richardson, as I said, or Richard, as I said, but he's played a little bit more. But the Isaiah Harge, the
DJ
Tevis
Burks.
Metcalf, yeah, the DJ Burks, like guys that I don't necessarily think are going to play a ton for Tennessee, but they are depth, they are bodies. But no, I'd say, to me, I think they did as well at safety, particular, as they did at any spot in the portal with guys you feel like can come in and be solid players. I don't think anyone has like the upside of a Chaz Coleman in the secondary, but guys that have played a lot of football at power level schools and have been solid doing so.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's what we said, going into it. Like Rick talked about, just throw a bunch in the secondary and see what sticks. And what I like about it too is there's a lot of versatile pieces. It's a lot of guys that have experience playing safety and nickelback, or cornerback and a little bit of nickelback, or a guy like Jadis Richard who just joined on Sunday. He's played all over the secondary. He's played cornerback, safety, nickelback. He could really go wherever you need him to. So I think that's also very valuable, where you can start to play around and mix and match a bunch of guys, and you also still have those returning pieces. Yeah, you lose a good bit of talent, whether that's the draft with a guy like Jermod McCoy and Colton Hood, or whether that's someone like Ricky Gibson who's going to the portal. But you bring back Idris Farouk, who had some spurts of last season where he looked really good. Ty Redmond came onto the scene and looked really good by the end of the year. You have those two pieces you can mix in. You have that freshman class from last year. You talked about Trey Poteet, where maybe you would have liked to see him a little bit more in the Music City Bowl and things like that, but at least he does have a year under his belt that he can rely on, and you would assume take a step forward and maybe not start or even be right there in the number 2 role, but if he's your third string guy at corner or something like that, that's a pretty good third string corner and someone that you can rely on maybe going forward as well. So I do really like where the secondary is at. Is it going to be the best secondary in the SEC? I don't think so, but it gives you a lot of options, and by the time the season starts, at least by the time maybe you start rolling into SEC play, you should have a lot of it figured out as far as like, okay, these are the 5 guys you like the most and are going to be your starters. And maybe, you're really comfortable with this guy also getting some snaps at corner. You're really comfortable with this guy coming and rotating at safety. You should be able to figure out for the most part what that secondary looks like. And it should be a better unit than last year, which, isn't saying too much, but still definitely a nice step in the right direction.
Let's kind of start there, because I do think that some of our answers for this first question especially are going to stick with the secondary. But we're looking at the big portal class that Tennessee has announced so far, 20 players. Again, there's a 21st that we're waiting on, but we're looking at these 20 players in total for the most part right here. Guys, there's a ton of different directions that you can go with this answer, so I'd imagine that we'll get 3 distinct ones out of all 3 of us. But let's do a little superlatives. First one being, who out of this class, who out of these 20 players is somebody that you can definitely envision starting? Now, obviously, we're not accounting, external factors or, something kind of crazy happening over the middle of the spring, summer, or fall that changes things before day one. But if day one were to start at the end of this week, coming up this Saturday, who is somebody that you do envision popping into a starting role for Tennessee without a lot of time to think, without much hesitation thinking about it? Schump, I'll start with you.
Okay. I'll go offensively. I think Ori Williams, I would make him a favorite to start at right tackle. He's the only guy on offense. Yeah, I think Quay Moss is going to start at nickel. I think Kayon Lee is going to start at corner opposite Ty Redmond. And then safety's a little bit harder, but I think at the very least you'll have one of TJ Metcalf and DeJuan Lane starting. Maybe both, but to me it feels like those two and Idris Farouk are kind of the clear top 3 corners going into spring practice.
Yeah, I think you pretty much
maybe Chaz Coleman too.
Chaz Coleman will start.
Definitely,
but that's obviously a position too where they'll rotate a good amount. If you had to pick one guy, if it was like there's one guy right now and you need to pick a guy everything's on the line. He needs to be the starter. It's Kayan Lee to me. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't starting at cornerback.
Totally agree.
He was very productive at Auburn. He has the SEC experience, and it's a spot where it's, sure, Ty Redmond was good last year. Sure, he took a lot of steps forward. I don't think this is a situation where he's got a promised starting role. I think it is a 3 or 4 man battle to see who the 2 starters are. And if there's a good chance it's Ty Redmond, and there's a good chance that it could be someone. I think Kayan Lee's definitely going to be one of those 2 starters at cornerback. But again, it's nice to have those options to rotate in. Last year, now you were down 2 guys that you didn't expect to be down the entire year, but you didn't have a lot of options to rotate in behind Colton Hood and Ty Redmond once that ended up being the situation you were placed in. Now, at least, maybe if you get 2 of your starters hurt again, it looks like it did last year. So I understand that, on the roster itself looked better at corner, deeper at corner than it ended up being, but you do have options to rotate in, and I expect, probably at least 3 guys to rotate in there. But Kayan Lee feels like a for sure starter. I agree. Ori Williams feels like will be your right tackle, but that one still, I wouldn't put my life on it, I guess, just because they do have options. I'm curious what they do with Donovan Haslam. It's his last year of eligibility. What does that look like? Is he going to be a piece off the bench that provides depth, or is he going to really push and try to get, that opening at guard? But I think there's no one that you missed, I guess. Like you look at,
I think there is one.
What about?
It's not as definitive.
You're talking about the kicker.
No, I wasn't. I mean,
that's
the kicker
a good call,
is.
though. He's going to be
definitely.
I'm claiming the kicker as that I will get without.
I think I know who you're referencing. Are you saying Amari Campbell?
No.
Because I was going to say if they're going with the 4-2-5, I still feel like it'd be Arion and Edwin.
I'm going Xavier Gilliam.
That's who I was going to bring up to you guys next. Is Xavier Gilliam somebody who can overtake those few pieces that we have seen on the defensive line? And again, we know that's a rotating
It's really
spot,
not
so maybe
many we have.
Yeah,
sure. I think yes. I think that he does, after this kind of full offseason, to work his way into the mix. I do feel like you're probably seeing him start at one of the DT positions.
I think there's a good chance. I think David Hobbs has one, and then the other one is Nathan Robinson going to take a step? Do you really like Xavier Gilliam? He's played a year under Jim Knowles already too, and Isaiah Campbell or Ethan Utley going to take a big step. There's a few options. So I get what Schumper was saying, I think is right too, where it's not a for sure thing, but he's definitely in the conversation to be a starter on the interior defensive line.
Yeah, it's like you said. It's, to me, it feels, a little bit like it does with any of those one guy you want to choose at safety, where it's like he's going to have a chance to start. It's going to be competition, and if he doesn't start, he's still going to play a lot.
I'll say this too, as far as a quote, if we're counting Cooper Ranvier, however, well, we do need to figure out how to say. I've heard it pronounced both ways so far.
I know. I have a video of it somewhere of him drilling a kick, and the announcer said it. Let me see if I can go find that while you're talking real quick.
Well, if Rick's claiming that, I'll say right now,
Blake Howard
will be your returner.
Oh, I was going to go Blake Howard as the long snapper.
No, it'll still be Bennett Brady.
Okay, Bennett Brady's back. He has one more year.
Bennett Brady's back. It'll still be Bennett Brady. Blake Howard will play a lot on special teams. DJ Burks will play a lot on special teams. So I guess they're special team starters. But I don't think Blake Howard will be it'll be Bennett Brady. Then next year they'll have some sort of long snapper battle, I guess. But I think Ian Duarte is going to be your return man, at least returning punts. We'll see what they do at kicks. But he has experience doing both. I do think Ian Duarte will be your punt returner. I think he's similar to the Oklahoma State kid they brought in earlier too, that ended up flipping to Baylor, where it was like, yeah, it's going to be really tough for you to get on the field and play wide receiver this year, just because you're a slot receiver and Braylon Staley's the reigning SEC freshman of the year. Like, he was phenomenal, but you can still get on the field and make an impact as a return man. And it is nice to add any sort of depth you can in the slot.
I've got it. ESPN broadcast, Louisville versus Miami. Louisville beats eventual runner-up Miami. Cooper Ranvier is what they said. Ranvier. So I think you do kind of, there's a little, I don't think it's an act. There's a little something at the end of that one. Not just Ranvier, Ranvier. You can have some fun with it. So maybe that's not right though. Maybe ESPN got it wrong. But from the Louisville Miami game where he drilled a 48-yarder to go up by 10 on the Canes, that is what the announcer said.
And ESPN announcers have never mispronounced the name.
Quite literally never. They might have
So
said it. They might have said it differently in the same game, but they weren't wrong on
that's
either time.
when I was watching, which another name we need to figure out how to say, Javen Gordon, the running
Yeah.
back from Tulane. I was watching a game from him. Both announcers were saying his name differently. It was I don't know. I didn't know what to take away from it.
That's really tough. That's a tough situation. You know, we look, but neither of them were wrong because ESPN guys are never wrong.
No.
Let's see. All right, so sort of in the same line, but who is somebody from this class that you guys feel like Tennessee most needs to click? And you know, in some ways, it's going back to who do you think is going to be a starter, and if you're a starter, you're probably going to be an impactful player. At least you certainly have a good opportunity to be. But if there's one or two guys that you guys want to narrow this thing down to, for me, I think it's one of the starting safeties. And sort of going into it with the idea that Idris Farouk is going to be a potential starter, and he might not be coming back, but familiarity in the building, not necessarily with the scheme coming in. But I think that you're looking at the DeJuan Lane and TJ Metcalf of, man, if you can have one of those two guys really click and be a strong safety right there, have a little bit of rotation where you need it and when you need it. But I look at that safety position and one of those two guys, whether it's DeJuan Lane or TJ Metcalf, of, man, if Tennessee can get one of those two guys to click, you can have a really good safety back there. I just think, and again, it still could be Farouk as well, but I think that, you know, you need some kind of good communicator back there. And maybe that's something that Tennessee has sort of lacked in the past, but somebody who can be able to talk down to all, you know, to the two levels of the defense underneath them, however it's going to be, see the field, be able to read it like a book. I just think that if Tennessee can get one of those two guys to click, that goes a long way in helping out the defense. So that's kind of my pick. I don't know who's going to eventually win out that battle. Maybe saying DeJuan Lane just because of the experience that he has if I had to choose one of the two, but that's kind of my pick for, you know, if Tennessee needs someone to click, I think that one of those two safeties is a really important one to do so.
I would go with Chaz
when
Coleman.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, you just we talk about them not having depth on the defensive line, and the best way to combat that is with some star power, and he's the guy that was the 5-star transfer, the number 6 player. Well, yeah, he might have ended up a little bit lower than that. I think at the time he committed, he was the number 6 player in the transfer portal, according to 24/7. You know, when you think of number 6 transfer in the portal, you think of a guy that's probably already proven he's a star, and he hasn't done that, but that speaks to what his potential is. And you know, he's a guy that I think, not that Tennessee's defensive line won't have any questions if he breaks out, but he can alleviate some of those concerns if he is a guy that goes out there and is a menace off the edge and has 7 or 8 sacks next season. That's one of the better pass rushers in the SEC. That answers a lot of questions, and you know, would you see how this defensive line can be a lot better than it was last year if that happens?
Yeah, it's just when I hear the question of like, what's the, like, who do you need to pan out? Like, who can you not miss on? Yeah, do you need one of those safeties to pan out? I think you're right, Rick. You do, but the fact that you have like 4 or 5 options makes it like, okay, well, if TJ Metcalf or DeJuan Lane doesn't pan out, you can go to the other one. You can go to Idris Farouk. You can go to maybe someone a little further down the list of the transfer targets that they brought in. If Chaz Coleman comes out next year and is just bad, like, you're kind of screwed at edge rusher. Like, you have Jordan Norman, sure, but he can't carry the entire load by him. I think the perfect situation for him is to be the guy that comes in relief of a Chaz Coleman. And Chaz Coleman's not that guy, then that's going to make it really tough and a lot of pressure on Jordan Norman. It's going to make it really tough. You're going to really have to hope that one of those freshmen or redshirt freshmen or sophomores pan out sooner than maybe you expect them to. Maybe the development really heats up for them faster than you thought it would. So that's, and I think, once again, this era, you look back to how much we're paying these guys. I think we can all imagine that Chaz Coleman's going to be making a good amount of money next year to come to Tennessee instead of some of the other suitors that were after him, big names like Ohio State, that you would think is pretty expensive. You don't want an expensive piece, a piece that you're thin at, that you really need to pan out to come out next year. And even if he's just fine, oh yeah, he had a good year. Like, you need Chaz Coleman to come out and look like, you know, the Micah Parsons that people are comparing him to at Penn State, like the game wrecker that people are expecting him to be. I do think it's pretty important for Tennessee's defense that he pans out.
Yeah, 100%. And I would almost go Xavier Gillum is maybe one of the other options just for the same reasons we talked about. Though, to me, it feels more like if you're going to have stars on the defensive line, it'd be like a David Hobbs breakout along with a
Sure.
Chaz Coleman. So those are, and you could say KN Lee too, but that just, you just have 2 years of what he is in the SEC. I think he kind of just is what he is. He's not going to be a bust. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a first team All SEC guy, though it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being like a second or third team All SEC guy. So he's a guy Tennessee needs to pan out for the reasons we talked about, but he just feels like a little bit more of a known commodity.
Yeah, maybe that's a good distinction in the question. Guys who Tennessee just kind of needs to pan out as what they thought they are and why they brought them in versus, guys who can potentially click and take that next level. If Chaz Coleman can click and take that next level, because again, as we've talked about, not just on this episode, but the others, he is fairly inexperienced in this sport. As a true freshman last year, was banged up for a lot of November, I think it was, so missed some games there. Had a great performance against Ohio State, had a couple of performances that, he's kind of building blocks on, but I think there is a difference between that, needing somebody to kind of have it all click together and become the player that he can be, versus just a guy like Kane Lee, who you say, hey, if you can just, if you can be who you are, obviously growth is great and needed anywhere, and that's always, certainly acceptable. But I think that's a good distinction between the two. All right, last kind of question for me about this portal class that we can get into. We've talked about the guys who we think can be starters. We've talked about the guys who we feel like can click or pan out. What about underrated pieces to this class? I think that, the names at the top of the class are very well known. Amari Campbell, Chaz Coleman, TJ Metcalf, Dwan Lanning, Xavier Gilliam, Kane Lee. I think that those names are fairly known because of how much they've been talked about. But who are some of the guys who people aren't talking about as much, who you feel like, hey, if they get into the right situation, maybe if they can, things can start to click for them, not to use the last question's wording or verbiage a little bit, but who are some of the more underrated players that you see in this class that you think if they fall into the right situation, then, they could help Tennessee a good bit there?
Sylvia, I'll let you take it first.
I got Kaden Lee still almost fits that mold to me, where I don't think he's being talked about enough. Where we've talked about it, so I won't spend too much on. But he just feels like a safe bet that he's going to be a good, dependable cornerback for Tennessee next season. And I think he gets lost in the fold because there's some maybe shinier names out there. There's a lot of talk about the Penn State guys for good reason. And he just kind of goes under the radar too. And I think part of that is he was the third guy in the boat for Tennessee. So he's been committed for a while now. And so you just kind of push forward. And when you have 20 plus commits in the portal class, you're going to start to forget about some of those first guys that committed. So he's one that sticks out maybe as not being talked about as much. Just scrolling down the list. I'm and it's kind of a similar situation. I think people are talking about, I do like TJ Metcalf, and I think he'll be one of the starting safeties. So I think that's another one where just because there's so many defensive backs, maybe he gets lost in the mix as far as how good he could be in this defense if things do pan out. But I don't know, it feels like there's kind of, you could tier rank them. You could put a lot of these transfers, you could make a tier list. And I think a lot of them would be pretty mutually agreed upon as far as importance of landing. So it can be tough a little bit, I guess, to find man, this is the guy that no one's talking about. He's going to be a superstar. I'm not sure if there's too many of those in this transfer class. A lot of guys that I think at least what to expect.
Yeah, well, I mean, just kind of, I take this question more in the direction of guys that maybe, people aren't talking about that are just going to have a real role. That people are going to be talking about when the season rolls around. Javon Gordon's the one for me that stands out just because he's going to be in that top three at running back. He very easily could end up being the number 2 back. Ran for over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns last season. Is he a true freshman, maybe a redshirt freshman at Tulane? So a guy that could feasibly get better too. I haven't seen a ton of people talking about him, and that's not shocking. Tennessee's not going to be Tennessee's starter, but that's a spot Tennessee's going to play multiple guys, and it's a spot if you're playing, you're getting the ball. So I think he's a guy that will be a lot more talked about. I have one more, but I'll let Rick or if y'all have anything else you want to throw out before I get to them.
Well, I think I may know who you're going with, and so I'm going to pick differently. I like Jordan Norman. Again, we've talked about Chaz Coleman a lot, and he is kind of the big fish of this class and the 5-star prospect. And you go through the transfer portal rankings, and there's really not that many 5-star prospects, and Tennessee was able to pick up one. You would think a lot of that reason because of his familiarity with Jim Knowles and that defensive scheme, and obviously what Tennessee compensated him with financially. But I think that Jordan Norman was also a good pickup behind him. You think about what Tennessee lost in the portal, which is something that we haven't talked about as much today. But you're losing Joshua Josephs to the next level. You lost Caleb Herring to the portal, and you lost Jordan Ross to the portal. You need a little bit of, you need a second guy there. It's not like you're just looking for one guy to step up and replace another one guy as a 1-for-1 swap. But you really lost the 3 guys who were productive for you last year. And I think that Jordan Norman, coming from the level of Tulane, might not be, as flashy as a former 5-star prospect. Chaz Coleman might not be as flashy as some of these other guys that Tennessee has gotten. But I think he was productive with the Green Wave, and that's a team that got to the college football playoffs. Did not necessarily get too close to coming to the next round of the college football playoffs. But, he was there. He helped his team get there. I just like the idea of being able to get that one flashy star who I think that Chaz Coleman will be, but then also supplementing that with a guy who has been productive behind him to be able to, come in and mix things up. So I like Jordan Norman a lot. I think that he's a guy that people aren't talking about as much simply because Chaz Coleman is in the mix, but secondly, because he's not coming from a big school like an Auburn, a Penn State, even a Michigan, a Colorado to a degree. But I think that that's something that Tennessee fans will be plenty familiar with by just a couple of games into the season.
Yeah, I think that's 100% fair, 100% true. It's the same, he's going to play a bunch of snaps. Tennessee doesn't have a lot of bodies there. The other name I was going to go with is just Donovan Haslam. Not that I don't really see a path to him being a starter necessarily, but Tennessee lost all its depth pieces on the offensive line. All the backups basically all transferred. Max Anderson, Bennett Warren, those guys. I think I'm missing one other dude as well. But the fact that Haslam can play guard, can play offensive tackle, he has some experience doing both, like a little bit of a swing guy and a guy that has been able, played at West Virginia last year, most of his career at Austin P, but played 300, 400 snaps. And not that he was just amazing, but he's a body that's capable. Disaster's not going to strike if he goes out there. I think that was a good way to supplement the offensive line.
I got one too. I guess Trent Thomas at tight end. Like, there's a chance he plays a good bit in that kind of blocking tight end role that Tennessee's like to use in 12 personnel. You lose Jack Van Dorselaer, so you had to immediately turn around and find another Jack Van Dorselaer, and it seems like it's Trent Thomas. Deshaun Brain could play a good bit this year. He's not a blocking tight end. He's more of a slot receiver than a blocking tight end at this point in his career. He still needs to put on a lot of weight, similar to what Ethan Davis was when he got to campus. Now Ethan Davis looks really good, and he's you can insert him in the run game. He can pass protect. He can do all those different types of things. But it took a while for Ethan Davis to get to that point and to be this dependable option that Tennessee is going to expect from him this upcoming season. So if you want to put him out there and he can play that almost Miles Kitzelman role, and then you want to find a Jack Van Dorselaer to come in and be able to block and do those types of things, it feels like Trent Thomas would probably be that option. I guess you can look towards a Cole Harrison, or you can look towards a Luka Wolf, who Luka Wolf is ginormous. I did not realize how big Luka Wolf is, the freshman from overseas this year. Trent Thomas feels like a guy that maybe that's what they're going to ask for him to do. Not going to be too flashy in the pass game, but could path protect and then also, get his nose in and block in the run game as well. So that's a name I think that could play somewhat of a role this year, almost just kind of a sixth offensive lineman type of role.
What about the last kind of name on my list? Because I think we've hit everybody in some sort of meaningful fashion, one way or the other, that are the top guys for Tennessee for this portal class. But what about Moss, the safety from Kansas State? He was the very first guy to commit to this Tennessee portal class. It seems like he might have as good of a chance as anybody to be in that nickel spot, depending on what they want to do again. But it's also just part of that whole idea of, hey, you've got all these incoming secondary players, throw them out onto the field and see who sticks where. But I think maybe Moss could have a good chance at being that nickelback for Tennessee. And, well, we saw how important that role was with McMurray last year and so on and so forth. What do you guys kind of project for him, or is it too early to say? Or, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I think he'll be a starter. Tennessee has, I think, added some more, people who are capable of playing that spot since landing him, but he's still definitely a guy that I would pencil in as a starter, and played at that spot in the Big 12 last season, and was pretty good doing so. So, he's definitely probably is, since he was the first guy, and since it got done so quickly, it is probably one of the more overlooked ones, but definitely someone that I would pencil in as a starter.
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably look like it was with Jalen McMurray and Boo Carter when Boo Carter was on the team, where Moss will probably play 2/3 of the snaps or somewhere around there, and then you find someone else that can come in and play a third of them, whether that's a freshman or whether that's one of the other transfers, because they do have plenty of options that have experience there. You have, said a bunch of options in the secondary, but Moss feels like someone that'll probably be a starter, and if he's not, still should play a good amount.
Yeah, I would agree. As always, you can go and check out all of our transfer portal coverage over on RockyTopInsider.com, where we're going to be talking about these guys a little bit more heading into spring camp in just a couple of months or so. Also, Tennessee went ahead this week on Monday and announced their early enrollees from the 2026 signing class. So there is an overabundance of new players that we have to talk about, to look into, to break down, to react to, all this sort of stuff. We know their names. We'll find out how they look on the field here coming up once the weather starts to turn a little bit better in the month of April or so. But of course, a lot of football still going on. You can go and check out at RockyTopInsider.com. All right, guys, final 10 minutes of the show left. Let's turn it over to the basketball side of things. Schump, we'll start with men's basketball. We talked about it a second ago. Tennessee went into Coleman Coliseum last weekend, and I don't want to say defied the odds, but considering they were, the betting underdog, I guess that maybe to an extent that works. But for a team who hadn't picked up a true road win at that point through the season, 0-3 with losses to Syracuse, Florida, and Arkansas, I thought that Tennessee showed a really mature team that went into there, was able to take care of business against Alabama. But I think the main point here is you talk about Nate Ament. Last 4 games, I could be a little bit wrong in this, but 17 points, 23 points, 17 points, and then a career-high 29 points against the Crimson Tide. If he's playing as good as he is right now, being more assertive on the offensive side of the court, what does that ultimately do for this Tennessee team ceiling?
Yeah, it's just what they need. This was always a team that was built that Nate Ament and Jacoby Gillespie were going to score a lot of points, and besides that, you really weren't going to have a ton of dudes at least be consistent night in, night out. So you need Ament to be aggressive and to be consistent, and I think that's more of what you're seeing. It's maybe less on the aggressive. I mean, you got that against Alabama. That was by far the most assertive he's been. Some of these other games in this stretch, he hasn't always been super aggressive, but has at least been more consistent in his ability to get to the free throw line. Shooting his free throws better than he did earlier in the season. So it's what Tennessee needs, especially now as we look. And Jalen Carey gets injured in that Alabama game. We haven't heard anything official from Tennessee, but from what I have heard, it was a hyperextension, which is what Rick Barnes thought after the game. And we'll see the timeline, but I think he's going to miss a couple games if that does prove to be the case. So. He's a guy that at times has flashed as a scorer for Tennessee this season. And if you're gonna take that option out for a couple games, you need Nate Ament to keep doing what he's done. And I would also point out that if Tennessee does lose Jalen Carey for a couple games, I think you'll see Nate Ament more at the 4, which should make some life easier for him offensively. Now he's going to need to be stronger defensively. He's going to need to be a better rebounder. Because that opens up some issues if you're playing that lineup, but it should, allow him to attack space and just be a little bit easier for him to get to his spots as Tennessee spaces the floor a little bit better.
Tennessee will take on Georgia in Athens on Wednesday night, a game that was originally supposed to be playing tonight, which is Tuesday. So that game got pushed back just about 24 hours or so, one day, because of all the inclement weather in the area. Talk to me about just where this Georgia team is. I think some casual fans might be surprised to see the Bulldogs in the top 25 rankings. unless they fell
They're
out.
not. They fell out.
They fell out. Okay,
Yeah.
well, now you got.
Well, I was a little surprised by that.
But they have been decently consistently, I think, in the top 25 at least the last couple weeks. But a team that does appear to be on the rise regardless. Talk to me about what this Georgia game looks like coming up on Wednesday, and just what Tennessee needs to make sure they do in order to win. Considering, like what you talked about a second ago, potentially no Jalen Carey, who's been a big piece to this Vols roster.
Yeah, Georgia 4-3 in SEC play this year. Road losses at Florida and Texas. Nothing to be ashamed of. A home loss against Ole Miss is pretty bad, but home win against Auburn, home win against Arkansas, and a win at Missouri. So a team that's been solid in SEC play, and I think better than people expected. Blue Kane, who's obviously went to Knox Catholic and Knoxville Kids, probably their second best offensive player behind Jeremiah Wilkinson, who's a transfer from Cal, and then Santo Cyril inside has taken some big steps from his freshman to sophomore year. And I guess, this is from a style of play aspect. This is not really what you would think of with a Mike White team. They play the second fastest pace in the country. They get up and down the floor a ton. And then I think when you're talking about keys or whatnot, turnovers, Tennessee against Alabama had its tied for its lowest turnover rate of the entire season. That was a big reason they were able to win that game. Now, Alabama does not force a lot of turnovers. Georgia much better at it. Force them at 19.6% of possessions, ranks 53rd nationally. Tennessee's got to be able to take care of the basketball in this game, and I think that's where we'll see. Troy Henderson missed the Alabama game with a left shoulder injury that he suffered in practice last week. Can Tennessee get him back? Certainly, he's been a lot better in that backup point guard role than Ethan Berg has, and Berg did not inspire a whole lot of confidence in his 1 minute played in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. So those are a couple of things that I look at, but a game that's going to be a challenge, a game that I would guess Tennessee will be slight underdogs in a building Tennessee has traditionally not played well in, even these last couple of years when they've had far better teams in Georgia.
Yeah, no kidding. It does feel like that can at times be a very challenging place for Tennessee. And Georgia's one of those places that puts their student section very close to the court, so you're hearing it a lot right there. But a place that maybe not necessarily has been a house of horrors, but a challenging place nonetheless. And we'll see how that shakes out. Sylvia, no Lady Vols game this week, if I'm not mistaken. A road trip to Ole Miss has been postponed, and I don't think it's been put back on the schedule yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll see what they do with that. I don't know how they're going to fit it in. I guess there is a world out there, I guess, where they don't fit it in if it doesn't matter for SEC tournament seeing stuff like that. But I think both teams would like to play it because if you win, it looks really good on your resume. Maybe if you lose, it doesn't look the best, but it's a good opportunity for both teams to earn another resume boosting win for two teams that are trying to jockey for a position to get one of those top 4 seeds to in the NCAA tournament where you're allowed to host. So we'll see what they do with that. They do play Thursday against Mississippi State, but that Ole Miss game it's still up in the air on what they're going to do with that. It's interesting too. So they don't have a bye. The Lady Vols don't have a bye week, or they don't have a bye date. They have no open dates left, is what I'm trying to say. So there's no just stick it there. And obviously you have to match what Ole Miss's schedule is too. It's just a disaster. But anyway, go on.
That was pretty much a lot of was.
How bad was the weather, Sylvia? How bad was the weather in Mississippi?
It was apparently awful. It was not like, really? Oh, that was soft. It was like, oh my God, yeah, they needed to cancel that game. Just a sheet of ice everywhere. I know Coach Yo, she loves her social media, the Ole Miss head coach, and she was posting pictures and she was like, I just got power back for the first time in 2 days. It was bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like they got it pretty good. All right. Well, you talked about a little bit at the beginning of the show here today, but just what are your thoughts on where this Lady Vols team is right now? It seems like the emergence of Mia Paldo has been very big for Kim Caldwell's squad here as of late. Just where do you see this team as with about 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, SEC games under their belt, and where they need to go from here heading into the rest of the SEC slate?
I think you hit it with Mia Paldo. She looks like, the type of point guard that the Lady Vols thought they were going to get when they recruited her. And she looked like that in the preseason a little bit, but then game action started, she started turning the ball over a bit. And she wasn't hitting a lot of shots. Now, not only is she hitting big shots and leading the team in scoring in a lot of these games, but she's just not turning the ball over. Even in games where maybe she'll have just 1-2 assists. It's 0 turnovers. And that's such a big deal for Tennessee to have someone that they can reliably put the ball in their hands. A lot of teams have tried to, defend the Lady Vols press in running the floor by pressing themselves at times. So to have someone you can just get the ball to Mia Paldo and you trust her to make the right pass and not turn it over when she puts the ball on the floor, I think that is a big deal. So she's been a big piece of it. They're still trying to get Talasia Cooper to be more consistently involved. Kim Caldwell took the blame for an inefficient night against Kentucky, but Talasia Cooper still was very pivotal in the fourth quarter and made some big shots. It came up with the game-winning steal. So she's a big piece of it. Looking like Janai Barker, trying to get her back, and maybe having that open date from this last Monday will help for her with her kind of above the shoulders injury. Kim hasn't officially said what it is, but you have to think probably some sort of concussion type of thing that she suffered at Alabama. So probably a good thing for her. She has a little bit more time. They're starting to get healthy. They're starting to kind of click. And as Kim has said all season, like they needed the out of conference gauntlet where they took 3 lumps and 3 losses to kind of figure out who they were, what they need to improve. And now they're starting to look a lot better in SEC play. Are they the best team in the SEC? Just because the standings say so right now, I would definitely not say that's the case. They're probably, at highest, maybe the 4th best right now, maybe towards 5 or 6 realistically. That's still one of the best teams in the country. It was a stat from this last week's AP poll. There was, I think it was 10 teams in the SEC were ranked in the top 25 of the AP poll. It's like 5 of them in the top 10. It was the most ever by a single conference in the AP poll. That just, again, shows you how good the SEC is. So if you're the 4th, 5th, 6th best team in the SEC, you're still like a 3 seed, 4 seed, and you have a chance to go as far as you won the NCAA tournament. So there's nothing too much to complain about right now, but they still have to, figure out a way to win some even bigger games. Can you go back to back against UConn and win on the road? That's going to be a really tough task. Can you find a way to beat South Carolina on the road? It is another thing too, where LSU, a lot of these games, a lot of their big games are on the road this year too, which will make it a little bit tougher once those start to come around.
As always, you can go and find all the latest Tennessee football, basketball, and soon-to-be baseball coverage over at RockyTopInsider.com. Football, we've been talking about with the transfer portal and Tennessee announcing the 20-man signing class so far. Basketball is in the middle of the swing of things like we've been talking about so far. And then again, baseball, man, right around the corner. Ryan Schumper was down at Lindsey Nelson Stadium just about a week or two ago taking pictures of some of the new construction progress that's been going on. It looks beautiful. And you know who else thinks it looks great? Josh Elander, your new head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. He was on Sunday night's episode of the Rocky Top Insider Lowdown with Bob Baskerville and Chris Lowe, talking about the season coming up ahead, some of the changes to Lindsey Nelson Stadium, some of the players that he is most excited about, both incoming players and returning players. Baseball fever is about to take pitch, is about to be in full swing, I should say, right here in Knoxville as that all starts getting wrapped up or amped up. There's nothing like 30, 40-degree baseball in the middle of February. Is there, Ryan? You've covered this team for quite a long time.
Well, it's I won't be complaining about it this year because we're actually going to be seated inside. But last year when we were last year when we were outside, and I'm trying to get gloves on that are able to type, and I got like a shiesty on, and
you look like George Pickens.
Yeah, that wasn't the most fun, but it should be entertaining. And it's not like Tennessee plays a gauntlet to start the season against Nichols. But Nichols is from Louisiana. They should be able to have practiced baseball as opposed to like Hofstra, who is practicing baseball in a basketball gym for 2 weeks before the season. And then they come out and just make, 8 errors over 3 games. So, Tennessee should take care of business, but it should be a little bit better test than they've gotten early in the season with some of these northern teams. Iona, another one that was a classic back in maybe 2022 or 2023. That was before the run rule. That was before the run rule too. I think Tennessee outscored them like 54-6 over 3 games.
I remember, I remember after one of those big Iona games, walking around the old city and also seeing Tony Vitello just kind of out for a stroll in the old city after that game, just thinking like, yeah, he probably doesn't have too much on his mind, after a 22-run victory or whatever it was. Just kind of, go for a walk, enjoy the weather, see what is going on with the city. But again, speaking of Tony Vitello, this will be the first Tony Vitello-less season for Tennessee baseball in a while as Josh Elander takes the field with his team coming up in early February. Rocky Top Insider will have all your coverage. And, of course, we'll be bringing Jack Foster back into the fold for his great baseball coverage alongside Schump for the season. Everybody, if you could say a big prayer for Schump's Twitter account to come back so Ryan Sylvia does not have any more weeks ruined by not having his updates on social media. We would greatly appreciate that. We'll certainly let you know when Schump is back and swinging it up in action when he gets that Twitter account back. But otherwise, head over to RockyTopInsider.com for all the latest Tennessee news, notes, and coverage. You can follow Rocky Top Insider on any social media platform you're looking at Rocky Top Insider. Pretty simple to go find. And then also, we've got a giant network of shows now. That is really great. As we sit here and record this on Tuesday, we've also just a couple of hours ago posted a brand new episode of RTI Pancakes and Bacon. And let me look at this. Reed Bacon and Kyler Kerbyson. 2 hours and 21 minutes and 2 seconds.
Good Lord.
A full-length feature film is what this is. You could go and show this at the Cinemark at the Regal down the street on Kingston Pike, and it would be getting out at the same time as any other movie, if not maybe even a little bit later. 2.5 hour transfer portal extravaganza that these guys go on. They're talking about Tennessee's departing players. They're talking about Tennessee's new additions. They're talking about their 2025 season recap. Man, if you've got a road trip coming up, if you need something in the background, if you just want something to listen to, I cannot possibly recommend that enough. And by the way, it's going to be on for a while. 2.5 hours, an extravaganza of Tennessee football offseason coverage that Kyler and Reed are breaking down. I cannot wait for that personally. But also, other great stuff that we have on the RTI network of shows. We just mentioned a second ago, Sunday night's episode of the RTI Lowdown with Bob Baskerville and Chris Lowe featured the great Josh Elander, who was a joy to talk to, just hearing his perspective on different things. Again, talking about some of the new and returning players to this Tennessee baseball team. And then, of course, the RTI Rim Runner. Now, we talked a little bit about basketball here today. Ryan and Bob will be back in action at the end of the week to preview Tennessee's upcoming matchup against Auburn and break down whatever happens at Stegman Coliseum here on Wednesday night in Athens, Georgia against the Bulldogs. So a ton going on right now on the RTI network of shows. And then we also want to take a minute to give a great shout out to our great partner, WATE. I don't know about you guys. I was locked in on WATE over the weekend for the weather coverage. At one point, I saw, Ken Weathers is fantastic, but I saw Casey K and Sam Rothman doing a live shot, just driving around the highways of Knoxville, around downtown. It looked like a buddy cop movie. Yeah, Schump made a reference to the other guys when I'd sent them the video of what they were doing. I mean, it was awesome. It was so great. I don't know what the other news channels were doing around here, but I know that WATE had their people out in the city. I mean, it was fantastic. So I was really thankful for Channel 6's weather coverage here. I was personally watching it on my Fire TV and the Smart TV app, WATE 6 Plus. You can go and find that on your Apple TV, on your Roku TV, and on your Fire TV. Super simple app to download. Just search WATE 6 Plus, and you can go and find it there. A great way to stay in touch with the live stream, figure out what's going on there. You can see clips of things that are going on, whether it's weather news, East Tennessee news, and obviously sports news as well. And you can find our family of podcasts there as well. But otherwise, man, I'm starting to run out of breath as I talk about all these different great things that you can go watch. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. For Ryan Schumpert, for Ryan Sylvia, I'm Rick Butler. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast today, January 27th. A lot of portal news. You can go and find it over on RockyTopInsider.com. We'll see you back for the next one. Otherwise, stay safe out there and enjoy the week.